The morning of my stepmother's estate settlement dawned gray and humid, weak sunlight filtering through the dusty windows of Foster Notary Services. I sat in a mismatched chair in the corner, watching my stepbrother Dylan pace around the cramped office in his expensive suit, acting like he owned the place. Which, honestly, he probably would after today. "Miss Riley Hartwell," Ms. Foster's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you ready to begin?" I nodded, my palms sweaty against the plastic armrests. At 29, I was about to find out how little I really mattered to this family. 8 years since Mom married Richard, and I still felt like an outsider looking in. Miss Foster shuffled through her papers and cleared her throat. For Dylan Hartwell, as the biological son, the investment portfolio, the downtown properties, and the shares in Meridian Arts. She rattled off numbers that made my stomach drop. Dylan's grin got wider with each item, like he was unwrapping Christmas presents. Then she turned to me. "For Riley Hartwell," Miss Foster paused, looking uncomfortable, "the personal belongings from Linda's studio. This includes her vintage camera collection and approximately 200 rolls of undeveloped Polaroid film." The silence felt suffocating. Dylan actually snorted out loud. "Cameras?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Old cameras and film?" "Your stepmother was quite passionate about photography," Ms. Foster said weakly, clearly sensing how unfair this felt. Dylan walked over and patted my shoulder, his grip condescending. "Don't look so glum, Riley. That junk might be worth something to a collector. Maybe you can sell it and finally pay off those student loans." I jerked away from his touch and stood up. The Hartwell family wealth, built from Richard's art investments, now belonged entirely to his real son. All I got were Mom's hobbies, boxes of dusty cameras and film that had been sitting in storage. "That's everything?" I asked Ms. Foster. She nodded sympathetically. "The items need to be collected within 2 weeks." I walked out without another word, ignoring Dylan's fake concerned "Riley, wait up." The drive to Mom's old storage unit felt like a funeral procession. Dylan had made it clear he thought I was wasting my time, but something pulled me there anyway. The unit manager, an elderly man named Frank, met me with genuine sadness in his eyes. "Your mom was a sweet lady," he said, unlocking the metal door. "Always talking about light and shadows. Said she saw things others missed." I stepped inside and felt my breath catch. Dozens of vintage Polaroid cameras lined the shelves, each one carefully labeled with dates and locations. But it was the boxes of undeveloped film that made my heart race. Hundreds of cartridges, some marked with cryptic notes in Mom's handwriting. "She'd come here at odd hours," Frank continued. "Especially near the end. Sometimes I'd hear her talking to herself about patterns and the truth Dylan doesn't see. Thought maybe the cancer meds were affecting her mind." I picked up one of the film cartridges. On the label, Mom had written RH. "You'll understand," in her careful script. My hands started shaking. "Patterns?" Frank nodded. "She kept saying the same thing over and over. Riley has the eye. She'll see what I see." That night in my studio apartment, I sat surrounded by boxes of cameras and film. My design work forgotten, I stared at the cartridges spread across my coffee table. Each one had a different label, some with dates, others with locations, a few with just cryptic phrases like "the real collection" or "Dylan's blind spot." I pulled out the instant camera developer I'd bought years ago and carefully loaded the first cartridge. As the images slowly materialized, my world shifted. These weren't random snapshots, they were photographs of documents, gallery records, and what looked like authentication certificates for expensive artwork. My phone buzzed. "Dylan is calling for the 3rd time tonight." I let it go to voicemail, too focused on what I was seeing. I opened my laptop and started researching the pieces shown in Mom's photos. Meridian Arts Gallery chain, Richard's pride and joy. But according to these photos, some of their most valuable pieces had questionable provenance. A text from Dylan appeared: "Stop wasting time with Mom's junk, Riley. Come work for me." It's what she would have wanted. I almost laughed. What Mom wanted was for me to pursue my art, not become Dylan's assistant. She'd always believed in my design work, even when Richard dismissed it as computer doodling. But something about these photos kept nagging at me. The way they were organized, the specific documents she'd captured, it reminded me of something from my design courses. Visual storytelling. Mom wasn't just taking random pictures. She was building a narrative. I developed another role, my hands trembling with anticipation. These photos showed auction records, payment receipts, and what looked like correspondence between Richard and various galleries. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze: photos of Dylan at gallery meetings, clearly documenting deals he'd supposedly made himself. A knock at my door made me jump. It was past 1 a.m., who would be here now? Through the peephole, I saw Dylan standing in the hallway, his usually perfect appearance disheveled and panicked. "Riley," he called out. "Open up. We need to talk about those cameras." I stayed silent, watching him through the glass. He'd never cared about Mom's photography before. Why was he here now, in the middle of the night, asking about supposedly worthless junk? "Riley, please," his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Mom left instructions about those photos. You need to give them to me." Instructions? My heart started hammering. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe there really was something hidden in these images. "Go away, Dylan," I called through the door. "The cameras are mine. They're all I got, remember?" "You don't understand," he hissed. "Those photos, they're not what you think. Give them to me now, and I'll give you $50,000. $50,000? For photos he'd called junk just hours ago? I backed away from the door, my mind spinning. Dylan was reckless with money, but he wasn't stupid about business. If he was offering that much, these photos must be worth far more. I heard him fumbling with something outside. Keys? Did he somehow get a copy from the landlord? I quickly gathered the photos and undeveloped film, stuffing them into my camera bag as I heard my front door click open. "Rayleigh." Dylan's voice echoed through my apartment. "Where are you? Where are the photos?" I locked myself in my bedroom, clutching the camera bag. Under my desk lamp, I spread out the photos I'd developed. In the harsh light, I could see details I'd missed before: handwritten notes in the margins, timestamps that didn't match official records, and signatures that looked suspiciously similar to Mom's handwriting. "Rayleigh." Dylan was getting closer. "Think about what you're doing. Those photos could destroy everything we've built." I flipped over one of the Polaroids and found something that made my breath catch. A note in Mom's handwriting: "My dearest Riley, if you're reading this, you found what I always hoped you would. You see details others miss. You question what others accept. And now, my darling girl, you're about to understand why Richard and Dylan have always been so afraid of your talent." The pounding on my bedroom door felt like thunder, but I could barely hear it over my racing heartbeat. I was too busy reading Mom's hidden messages, my hands shaking as each photo revealed a truth that would shatter everything. The images weren't just random documentation, they were evidence of art forgery, fraudulent sales, and investment schemes that would destroy Meridian Arts. And Dylan, still shouting outside my door, had no idea that his perfect inheritance was built on lies. I don't know how long I sat there on my bedroom floor, going through photo after photo while Dylan continued his rampage outside. My fingers trembled as I pieced together each carefully documented fraud. The photos in this collection, when combined with the authentication records I've hidden in the final roll, will expose the truth about Meridian Arts. Richard built his fortune on forged pieces and fake provenances. I was his secret weapon. Riley, and you, my dear daughter, were always meant to be my witness. A loud crash from my living room snapped me back to reality. Dylan had apparently decided to stop asking nicely. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, already dialing 911. "Go ahead," Dylan yelled back. "I'll tell them you stole company property. Those photos belong to Meridian Arts." But I understood now. The hidden messages explained everything: how Mom had been Richard's secret art authenticator, how she discovered the forgeries, how she documented everything while pretending to just be a hobby photographer. These photos weren't just memories. They were evidence. The final roll will lead you to my safety deposit box, Mom's note continued. Everything you need is there. But be careful, Riley. Richard and Dylan will do anything to keep their secrets buried. I heard Dylan's footsteps retreating, followed by my front door slamming. Taking a shaky breath, I came out of my bedroom. My apartment looked like a tornado had hit it. Dylan had clearly torn through everything looking for the photos. But I didn't care about the mess. I had work to do. First, I photographed every single Polaroid with my phone, uploading them to multiple cloud storage accounts. Then I carefully developed the final roll Mom had marked for Riley's eyes only. As each image appeared, my hands started shaking again. Bank records, wire transfers, and correspondence that would bury Richard's empire. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, my neighbor who used to work as a secretary. Riley, strange men were asking about your apartment earlier. They wanted to know about your mother's things. Be careful. They were covering their tracks. I had to move fast. The safety deposit box address was written on the back of the last photo, a downtown bank I'd never heard of. Mom had written that she'd rented it under her maiden name, keeping it hidden from Richard and Dylan. The key is taped under the camera case, her final note explained. Inside the box, you'll find everything needed to expose them. Use your designer's eye, Riley. You'll see the patterns they missed. I packed quickly, laptop, all the photos carefully wrapped, some clothes, and Mom's final instructions. As I headed to my car, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street with its engine running. Dylan wasn't giving up. The drive downtown was nerve-wracking. The dark sedan stayed behind me for the first 30 minutes, matching every turn I made. I took random exits and doubled back through parking garages, finally losing them near the financial district. By the time I reached the bank, it was almost 9 a.m. The building looked ordinary from the outside, just another glass office tower among dozens of others. But as I walked through the lobby, clutching Mom's final photos, I felt like I was carrying dynamite. The safety deposit box area was in the basement, sterile and quiet. I showed the attendant Mom's key and my ID, my hands shaking as she led me to a small private room. Inside the metal box, I found exactly what Mom had promised: authentication certificates, wire transfer records, and correspondence that would destroy Richard's art empire. But it was the manila envelope marked Riley's inheritance that made my breath catch. Inside were original appraisals showing the real value of pieces Meridian Arts had sold as authentic masterpieces. The numbers were staggering: millions of dollars in fraudulent sales, all documented in Mom's careful handwriting. A business card fell out of the envelope. James Mitchell Art Fraud Investigation. On the back, Mom had written, "When you're ready, call him. He's been waiting." The address from Mom's final photo led to a converted warehouse in the Arts District. The building looked abandoned, its windows covered with old concert posters and graffiti. But when I used the code Mom had written on the photo back, a service elevator opened to reveal a hidden floor. What I found there took my breath away. Mom's secret studio was like stepping into another world: professional lighting equipment, dozens of cameras, and walls covered with enlarged photographs documenting years of art fraud. But what made my designer's eye focus were the pattern boards, visual timelines showing how Richard had built his fortune on fake pieces and forged provenances. My God, I whispered, moving closer to examine them. These weren't just random photos. Mom had created a complete visual story, mapping out every fraudulent deal, every fake authentication, every stolen piece that had passed through Meridian Arts. A familiar voice behind me made my skin crawl. Pretty impressive for a hobby photographer, wasn't she? I spun around to find Richard standing in the doorway, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Dylan stood beside him, his usual arrogance replaced by panic. "How did you find this place?" Richard asked, stepping into the studio. "Linda was so careful to keep it hidden. We've been searching for months." I clutched Mom's photos tighter. "You're supposed to be grieving her." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Your mother was brilliant, Riley. Too brilliant for her own good. She saw patterns that could destroy everything I've built. The estate settlement was a setup, I realized. You wanted me to find the cameras. We needed you to lead us here, Dylan explained, moving to block the elevator. Mom changed all her passwords before she died. We couldn't access her files without the photos. And now, Richard said, advancing slowly, you're going to help us destroy everything in this studio. All evidence of Linda's investigation will disappear, and Meridian Arts will remain secure. But they'd made one crucial mistake. While they were talking, I was backing toward Mom's main computer workstation. Her final note had mentioned an emergency protocol, something she called the truth release. Actually, I said, reaching behind me to hit the enter key, I don't think I will. The studio's screen suddenly lit up, and Mom's voice filled the room from hidden speakers. Truth release activated. Uploading all evidence to FBI Art Crime Team, IRS, and major news outlets. Upload cannot be stopped. Richard's face went white with rage. What have you done? Mom called it her insurance policy, I said, feeling braver with each word. Every photo, every document, every piece of evidence is now being sent to dozens of secure locations. Meridian Arts is about to face some very serious questions. Dylan lunged toward the computer, but it was too late. Alarms started blaring, and the studio's security system activated, sealing the elevator. We were trapped together with the truth that would destroy their empire. She knew, I continued, watching their faces crumble. Mom knew you'd try to bury her discoveries, just like you buried the real artists behind those pieces. So she made sure the truth would come out, one way or another. Through the studio's windows, I could see police cars arriving. Someone, probably Mom's security system, had alerted the authorities. Richard and Dylan looked at each other with pure terror as sirens echoed through the building. The camera bag that had started everything sat by my feet. Those seemingly worthless photos had led me exactly where I needed to be. Mom's final gift wasn't just evidence, it was justice. And as I watched Richard and Dylan realize their perfect scam was over, I smiled, knowing this was just the beginning. The real story of Meridian Arts was about to be told, and this time, no one could hide behind forged signatures. The next 48 hours felt like living inside a news documentary. I watched from Elena's couch as Meridian Arts' reputation collapsed in real time, every major news channel covering the art fraud scandal that was shaking the entire industry. Meridian Arts mogul arrested in massive forgery scheme, the headlines screamed. Secret photos expose million-dollar art fraud. Daughter's discovery brings down gallery empire. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing reporters, lawyers, federal agents. Everyone wanted to hear my story. But the only call I cared about was from Elena, who had more of Mom's secrets to share. Your mother left this with me before she died, Elena told me, her voice shaky with emotion. She made me promise to give it to you after everything came out. An hour later, I sat in Elena's tiny kitchen, holding another letter from Mom. This one was different, not instructions or evidence, but her personal story. The truth about why she'd married Richard and what she'd discovered. My dearest Riley, it began, now that you know the truth about Meridian Arts, it's time you understood your own story. You were never just his stepdaughter. You were always meant to be my successor. As I read, everything clicked into place. Mom hadn't just been Richard's wife. She'd been his secret weapon, using her artist side to authenticate pieces while he handled the business side. But somewhere along the way, she'd realized he was selling forgeries and keeping the real pieces for himself. Those design classes I'd taken, they weren't just about graphic design. Mom had been training me to see what others missed, to spot the subtle differences that separate real art from clever fakes. My work with visual patterns had taught me exactly what I needed to expose Richard's scheme. Every time Richard dismissed your work as computer art, Mom wrote, every time he favored Dylan, he was helping prepare you for this moment. You learned to think independently, to trust your own eye. While Dylan was learning to charm clients, you were learning to see truth. A knock at Elena's door interrupted my reading. A man in a rumpled suit stood outside, holding a badge. Miss Hartwell? I'm James Mitchell, art fraud investigator. I believe your mother mentioned me. The next few hours were overwhelming. James explained how Mom had been working with federal investigators for months, documenting Richard's fraudulent sales while pretending to be just a devoted wife with a photography hobby. Your mother gathered enough evidence to shut down a dozen galleries, James explained, spreading photos across Elena's coffee table. But more than that, she identified the real artists behind pieces that have been misattributed for years. My hands trembled as I looked at the documentation. Dozens of cases, all meticulously researched, all now belonging to me as Mom's designated heir. Meridian Arts owes millions in restitution to the artists they cheated, James continued. And legally, as Linda's heir, you have the right to claim damages for her work. So what does that mean? I asked, though I was starting to understand. It means, Miss Hartwell, that you now control the evidence that could either destroy or transform the entire gallery chain. While Richard and Dylan sat in federal custody awaiting trial, I walked into Meridian Arts' flagship gallery the next morning not as the forgotten stepdaughter, but as the key witness in the biggest art fraud case in decades. Standing in the main exhibition hall, I found myself face to face with pieces I now knew were forgeries, their authentic certificates signed by Mom under duress. The real artworks were hidden in Richard's private collection, stolen from the artists who'd trusted him. 1 month later, I stood before a crowd of reporters and federal agents, announcing my decision about Meridian Art's future. This gallery was built on stolen creativity, I told the assembled crowd. Today, we begin making things right. I'm establishing a foundation to return stolen pieces to their rightful owners and to compensate every artist who was cheated. But more than that, we're transforming these spaces into what they should have been all along, places where real artists are celebrated, not exploited. Mom's camera bag still sits in my studio, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable inheritances are the ones that help others. The photos that once seemed like random snapshots now represent something bigger, the power of truth over deception. Dylan wrote to me from prison, alternating between angry accusations and desperate apologies. I sent back a single photo, Mom's portrait hanging in the gallery's place of honor, with a plaque reading Linda Hartwell, artist and truth-teller. He would understand the message. His world of lies was over. Richard maintained his silence, but it didn't matter anymore. The truth he'd fought so hard to hide was now his legacy. The great Richard Hartwell would be remembered not as an art connoisseur but as a thief who exploited his own wife's talent. Late one evening, as I was locking up my new studio space, Elena brought me one final letter from Mom. This one had been timed to arrive exactly 1 month after the gallery's transformation began. My darling Riley, I read, if you're reading this, you've done more than just expose the truth. You've begun to rebuild what was broken. I never wanted you to inherit a corrupt business. I wanted you to have the chance to build something honest, something worthy of your heart. I traced my fingers over her handwriting, feeling closer to her than ever before. Those worthless cameras had been anything but worthless. They'd been the key to everything. More than that, they'd been Mom's way of showing me that I'd inherited something far more valuable than money or status. I'd inherited her vision for a world where art matters more than profit. 2 years later, the former Meridian Arts spaces have been transformed into the Linda Hartwell Center for Emerging Artists. We've become a haven not just for new talent, but for artists seeking to reclaim work that was stolen from them. The foundation has helped dozens of creators get proper attribution and compensation for their pieces. Mom's camera bag still sits on my desk, its vintage Polaroids now a familiar comfort. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear the click of a shutter, as if Mom is still there, documenting new stories that need to be told. But the most important truth was there all along, hidden in plain sight just like those photos. Success built on lies will always crumble, but success built on truth and creativity will inspire others for generations. Dylan was released from prison last week. He sent me a message asking to meet to talk about rebuilding our relationship. I haven't responded yet. Some patterns, I've learned, are better left broken. Instead, I spend my time focusing on the future. The center hosts an annual Truth in Art exhibition where young artists can showcase their work without fear of exploitation. Last year's featured artist was a young photographer whose story reminded me of Mom, talented, underestimated, but determined to expose injustice through her lens. As I handed her the center's first annual Linda Hartwell Award, I saw Mom's portrait reflected in the gallery windows. The cameras in the photo seemed to shimmer with approval, reminding me that sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't the ones we can hold in our hands, but the ones that transform us from within. Those worthless cameras had given me something priceless: the truth about my past, control of my future, and most importantly, the chance to ensure that no other artist would ever be silenced or stolen from again. And that, I know, would make Mom prouder than any gallery opening ever could. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and pressing the like button.